Hello, hello. How is everybody? Thank you for stopping in. My name is Chris, and I'm going to start with these two wood boxes I picked up. I'm not sure if they're cedar boxes or acacia boxes, but they are real wood. And I thought, you know what? I don't want to make a riser. Let's do something a little different. Minis are all the rave, so I thought, let's make some shelves. I've got these 5-gallon paint stir sticks. I'm sure a lot of us have these on hand. If not, you can grab them from your local hardware store, and I'm going to use these as the shelves. So I'm just going to mark the width with my pencil, and when I do this, I want to make sure that these pieces are going to fit in there nice and snug. Once I get those pieces marked, I am going to take it out of my garage. I'm going to use my miter saw and I'm going to cut those down. Now for this other box, it's a little larger. I've got this piece of wood. It's been in my stash. I'm going to put a picture up here. I did pick it up from Lowe's, and I'm just going to do the same thing with this piece and just mark it for a long shelf. And once I get all of those cut down to size, I am just going to use a 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to smooth down all those splinters that were created from my cuts. And then I am also going to remove the label with a little bit of heat and a razor blade. And then I'm going to go ahead and use that 220 grit sandpaper and just go around those boxes. They're pretty smooth. This was probably an unnecessary step, but I just want to make sure everything is nice and smooth and prepped. Now I'm going to grab that shelf. I am applying some wood glue right around the edges and also along the back side. This is just going to make sure that everything sticks in there, because these pieces of wood are just a little too thin for me to feel comfortable shooting some brad nails in there. So I felt the glue was a necessity. Now I am going to just use a little hammer and tap my shelf right into place, kind of maneuvering it around. And once I get it in there, I can just set it where it needs to go. I'm going to use a little level to make sure I've got the shelf nice and straight. And just making sure it is pushed all the way back. Wipe up some of that excess glue. Double check my level. And then I'm going to just clamp that shelf into place while it is drying. And I'm just going to apply a clamp on each end. And now for the smaller one, I've got all my little mini shelves. I'm just going to apply some wood glue right around both ends and along the back side. And I'm just holding these together. I felt it was just easier just to get it all applied in one swoop. And then just using that hammer and just kind of tap, tap, tap them into place. And because I do not have a small enough level, I'm just going to have to eyeball this, making sure those shelves are as straight as possible. Now I do want to go ahead and apply a coat of shellac to both these pieces. And I'm just using the shellac in the can. For one, I don't have to take it outside. I can stay in my craft room and only use one coat. Once I get the shellac on, I do get busy and have to walk away from it, and I will return to it the next day. Okay, so I probably should have done this before I shellacked the piece, but I'm going to grab some walnut gel stain. I'm going to add a little bit of water, and that's what I'm going to use to coat the shelves that we made. This color with this wood was actually a very close match. I was actually pretty impressed on how well it looked together. Not that it matters because it's not going to stay this color, but I don't want light wood peeking through. So I definitely need to stain these shelves just to get it ready for my next step. Now I've got in the Pickle and Pantry Door from Sweet Pickins milk paint. I use 2 tablespoons of in a Pickle and 1 tablespoon of Pantry Door, mixed it all up, and once I've got it all mixed and it's sat and thickened, I'm going to use a fan brush. For one, this fan brush is going to definitely fit in this smaller area so much easier. But this is what I'm going to use to apply this paint. I will apply this to both boxes, and I am going to apply it everywhere. Front, bottom, back, shelves, everywhere. And I do end up applying a couple of probably more like 3 coats. I do dry down the coats in between with a heat gun, hoping to get that crackle to come out because I definitely wanted some crackle. The green color that I mixed up is kind of that old-timey vintage green, which I absolutely love. And being we're using that old vintage green, I felt, you know what? It needs to crackle. It needs to look vintage. It needs to look old. So the heat dryer will help move that along. Now, unfortunately, I have found that milk paint is unpredictable. I did use that shellac, which is supposed to help with the crackle. Now, maybe I let mine sit for too long because, like I said, it did sit overnight because I did not get a whole lot of cracking, but I do think I got enough cracking, and I'm happy with it. Now I'm once again going to grab some 220 grit sandpaper, and I do bounce around between the sandpaper and my sanding sponge, but I'm going to give these boxes a nice distressing around the edges. I also want to smooth out that paint. This is going to help remove any of those lumps and clumps that could have built up on the box. If you have any chipping going on, you want to go ahead and smooth that down so there won't be any more chipping. That would be pretty bad. If you sell the piece and it continues to chip off, the person who purchases it may not appreciate that. So a nice, good sanding on both these pieces, inside and out. Now, I really love this color. This color came out so good that I don't want to disrupt it. So I am going to seal this in with some clear wax and just all over, inside and out. And then I'm going to grab some Sweet Pickins dark oil wax, and I'm going to just work that wax into those cracks. And I'm just using a paper towel. That way I can kind of take off almost as much as I put on there. But having that clear wax down is going to prevent that dark oil wax from changing that color of that green, because I'm telling you, I really love this color. If you guys watched my video where I upcycled the sewing drawer, I did this same color green, but when I applied that dark oil wax, it really did change the color. And so I wanted to prevent that from happening, and this worked very well. But I'm just going to use a soft cloth. I'm going to wipe off that excess. And once I get this worked all the way around on both pieces, these boxes, which are now shelves for your minis, is complete. You guys will have to let me know what you think about the wood boxes turned to mini shelves. Now in project number 2, I've got these 2 books. I've just had sitting here. I have been wanting to do this forever, but I've got this book right here that I actually painted previously, way before my YouTube channel even came about. So I'm just going to take my sanding sponge and I'm just going to kind of sand off some of that paint that I've got on there. It feels like it's just a chalk paint. So that's what I'm going to do. Just kind of get that all smoothed down. Now I saw these molds from IOD in their summer release, the Bookish molds, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is the push I needed to finally get around to upcycling some books. Now, these books probably came from the Dollar Tree at some point, but they're, like I said, they're just sitting there, and why not make some decor? I'm just trying to get an idea which of these bookends that I want to use. I'm going to grab the cornstarch. We're going to prep these molds so that clay will pop out a lot easier. And then I'm going to grab some DOS air dry clay. I grabbed probably a little too much, but I am just going to kind of start rolling that and kneading it in my hands just to help warm it up. You see, I didn't think I had enough, which I did, but I grabbed more. So, good thing I can just pop that extra back in the bag when I'm done. But I'm just, like I said, kneading this, rolling it out into like a little tube because this is just a long area. And then I'm just going to start pushing that in with my fingers. And then just start pushing out some of that excess. And I'm just going to go ahead and skim some off the top. I like to use this. I picked it up from a Dollar Tree. I can't even think of what it's called, but this works perfect. And once that is all smoothed out, we can flip it over and release our mold, which is now considered a casting. And we're just going to simply lay that on the book. I'm going to just kind of make sure how it's going to fit, how much is overlapping. I am going to apply some water to my fingers and just kind of smooth out a couple of places that my fingernail cut. Yes, that is an issue. I probably should wear gloves when I do this. But I do just play around with it until I'm happy with the way it looks. And, you know, honestly, if you're looking for a vintage, old, rustic look, then you don't really have to worry about this step. I am going to use some Type Bond Quick and Thick to adhere this piece onto the book, just kind of smoothing it out with my fingers. I just want to make sure that that glue is coming to the very edges of this. That way everything will stick down nice and securely. And when I lay that on the book, around the edges, I want to make sure those edges are curving around onto that book and just making sure it's all touching. And I am just tapping. I don't want to distort all those pretty details, but I will use a baby wipe and kind of clean up some of that glue that is spitting out along the edges. And as I'm doing this, I'm just going to make sure all those edges are nice and flattened to the book. And then I'm going to leave it to set up and dry for several minutes. Now for the next book, I'm trying two different ways. I want to see which way works the best and is easiest, so I can at least let you guys know. But on the second book, I'm going to go ahead and paint it first, while the other book has the casting drying on it. So I'm going to be using an all-in-one paint. This is from Paint Couture in Simply White. And I am going to apply this all over the cover. Once the paint's dried, I've got this gorgeous decoupage paper. This was from Decoupage Central. And once I get that cut out, I am just going to see how this is going to fit. And it is going to be a little short on the length. So I'm going to use some water and a paintbrush. And this way I can tear out where I need to trim. That way those edges aren't going to be so crisp that they're really going to stand out. Instead, they're just going to blend in better with my paint. So once you got that wet, just start peeling it off. I like to use my fingers and just trim away. Now, once I've got the top and bottom trimmed, I'm not going to worry about the edges because we can just sand that off. But I will be using clear liquid patina as my decoupage medium. I'm just going to apply a nice, even coat. I'm using one of my fan brushes from the DIYstruggle.com. Guys, if you don't have these fan brushes, you really want these fan brushes. They work so well, and the price point is so good. So once I get that layer applied, I do mist the back of my decoupage paper with some water, and then I'm just going to get that laid down using some cling wrap. I'm just going to kind of smooth out that paper, eliminating as much of those air bubbles as possible. I also like to use this little roller or brayer and just kind of smooth it out, and then I'm going to leave it to dry. But while it's drying, I figured, you know what, let's just flip it over, use the other half of this decoupage paper and put that on the back side. And I pretty much am just repeating the same process as I did on the front. So we're just going to go ahead and skip ahead. Now, while that decoupage paper is drying, I can move back to our first book. That clay mold has set up enough to where I feel comfortable working with it. So I'm going to grab that same white paint color, and now I am going to paint this book. And I'm going to paint the entire cover and also that casting as well. Now, while that paint's drying, I can go ahead and sand off the edges of our decoupage paper. And I'm just using my little zip sander, finger sander, whatever you want to call it. And this is working out very well. I am using a 180 grit sandpaper to do this. I just find it just works a little easier. Now I can figure out which bookend I want to use for this piece. And we're just going to apply the cornstarch and do the same exact process we did on the first book. So let's go ahead and skip ahead. Now, once I get the end on this book, it does hang over just a little bit lengthwise. So I'm just going to simply trim that off by flipping it over, but not resting it because I don't want to distort the image. And then I'm just going to use this little chopper and cut it and then just kind of mold it to fit around that spine, just kind of tapping here and there. Like I said, we just want to move this mold and shape it to fit around the book. Okay, so I'm gonna, if you remember a couple of videos ago, I used half this decoupage sheet on a cigar box. So I'm gonna use the other half on this book. Waste not, want not. Now, once I figure out what section I want on this book, I'm just gonna use my fingers to kind of crease along where I'm going to want to cut out. And I am using my fingernail. I am kind of working this end here right into where that casting is. I'm going to want it to fit nice and snugly up against that. And then I can go ahead and just trim out the excess. Now this paper is larger than the book, so I don't have to worry about using any kind of water tearing method. I can just simply cut. And then this is going to be a little bit wonky. It's not a straight line. You'll notice if you do this step yourself, it's not going to be a straight line because your mold, if your mold is straight, kudos to you, but mine was not straight. So, you know, it's a little zigzag here and there, but that's okay. I got it trimmed out. You can see how it fits nice right next to that bookend. Once I've got that figured out, I'm going to use the DIY's clear liquid patina, and we are going to go ahead and decoupage that into place. Now, since this is a longer strip and I want those edges to butt up nicely, I'm going to apply my decoupage medium right against it first, grab my cling wrap, and then just kind of push it up against that casting, just kind of working it in there, smoothing it out, and then I'm just going to continue on applying that decoupage medium throughout the rest of the book. I do go ahead and mist the back with some water, and then we can get it all nice and smoothed out and let it sit and dry. And while that side's drying, I'm going to flip it over. I want to use the rest of this decoupage paper. I am in the process right now of trying to figure out what to do with all this decoupage paper, so stay tuned for that. But I want this here, what is remaining on the back side of the book. So I'm just going to use that paintbrush and water, and that way I can tear along that outer edge and we can avoid that crisp line, so I can kind of blend it into the paint. And then with the edge closest to that spine, I'm going to do the same thing we did on the front side. I am just going to use my fingernail and just kind of follow along, getting that crease so I know where to cut. And then we're simply going to decoupage that into place. All right, I am going to grab the color Queen Bee from DIY, and I'm going to use a little sponge dauber. I'm going to apply that paint right here on that outer edge. And then while that paint is still wet, I'm going to grab the color Spanish Sunrise. This is a fusion color, and on a different sponge dauber, I'm going to just kind of work that paint around the edge here. And I'm just going to let you watch what I'm doing. Pretty much just kind of want those colors to just blend together. Ever since I did that last blending, I really liked the way it looked. So I'm just going to keep on practicing. And I'm just, like I said, just blending this lighter color. I probably should have started with the lighter color, but then didn't think about it until after I had already gotten the darker yellow on. But that's okay. It works. It looks great. And then I will dry that down with my heat gun. Now for the spine of the book, I'm going to start with the lighter yellow color. Just kind of work that in sections. I mean, you guys don't even have to use yellow. And a lot of you have probably already done these book makeovers, but this is the first time I've ever done them. I mean, I've done simple things like dress a book up for Christmas or, holidays or whatever, but I've never really changed the appearance of the book, I guess you could say. But I'm just going to play around with this, adding these colors. I just kind of start around the details, just kind of getting that yellow in there. And I'm just going to work that. I changed my mind. I was like, I'm just going to work that in everywhere. And then while that's still wet, I'm going to grab that darker yellow and I'm just going to start applying it in just different sections, making it look kind of like it blended from light to dark to light. I don't know. I just thought this would look good. So that's what I'm doing. Now, once I'm happy with that, I'm going to grab the Connoisseur's Library stamps from IOD and try to figure out what I want to put on the side of this book. Of course, if you don't have these stamps, use a Cricut machine. If you don't have a Cricut machine, use different stamps. Draw on it, write on it, or just leave it blank. But just have fun with it. So I decided I was just going to put a little bit of a floral design right here. And I'm going to tell you what, I don't know what was going on, but I ended up having to do this probably 6 times before I got it to look right. I don't know if I was just not feeling the stamping that day or if the stampings weren't feeling me. But anyway, I did finally get it. But I did finally get it. So now I want to go ahead and age this book up a little bit. If you don't like the aging, then don't do this step. That's just plain and simple. But we all have our likes and dislikes, and they can't always be the same. And I'm making this for my daughter. I know that she loves rustic, so she's going to get some rustic books. And I'm just going to apply this glaze. It's the light brown sugar glaze from Couture, just all over, kind of dabbing it off in sections with the baby white here and there. If it's taking off too much with the baby wipe, then I'll go to a dry cloth and just kind of remove it that way. And once I'm happy with the cover, I am going to then take that same glaze and I am just going to brush that glaze around the edges of those pages. I just thought it looked a little weird with the book all distressed and aged and antiqued looking in those crisp, clean pages. I didn't think it looked right. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to apply some aging glaze to the pages. And I am kind of holding the pages closed with one hand while I'm brushing it on there, just so all of that doesn't drip down onto the pages. Like I said, I wanted to leave the books to where they can still be read, but while they're sitting on the shelf, they can look very pretty as home decor. Now, once I got that one book done, I can move on to the next. I'm going to grab the color crinoline, and I'm just going to kind of paint on the edges on the outside of that paper, just kind of blending that crinoline in to the paper. Thought it was a pretty close match. We're just gonna work that on, and I am using this fan brush. I just found that this fan brush worked very easy. Worked a lot better than using just a plain old brush, just to kind of get that blended in. I am then just gonna work that color all the way around the book. I do paint along the inside of the book cover, around those edges, making sure also to paint the spine. I'm going to use the color Basil around the edges of this book, and this is a very bad angle. I am very sorry about that, so we'll move along. Now, I did forget, on the book that we used all the yellows and the sunflowers, I grabbed a rub-on transfer out of the Flowers by the Poets transfer book, and I just cut out some wording, and I decided I was going to rub that on the front of the book just so it kind of looked like it had a title. So I am going to do that right here in this little section. And then I'm going to grab some cotton lace trim here. I picked this up from Hobby Lobby, and I'm going to just use some hot glue and just run that down, just kind of tapping it in as I go. And I just thought, what a better way to give a book some finishing touches than other with some lacy fabric. And I am going to do this to both the front and the back side, and adding that ribbon right there also kind of hides some imperfections, if you will. Okay, now to finish up our second book, I'm just drying down that crinoline that I had to paint back over some of the green that I didn't like the way it came out. Now that green again is the color Basil, and I'm just going to go along different areas, adding that color here and there. And just to bring out those florals, I'm going to grab just one of my little flat, small, chippy type style brushes with a little bit of paint on it. Just kind of float my brush, skim my brush along the surface, just giving that a little bit of color. And I did go ahead and use that same Connoisseur's library stamps for the spine of this book. I am going to also apply some of the light brown sugar glaze. And while I'm aging this book, to address what I had mentioned in the beginning, since I did these books two different methods. On one, I applied the mold first. On the other, I applied the paint and the decoupage paper first. So which way did I think was the easiest? I definitely think the easiest method was to go ahead and paint the book and apply the decoupage paper. Just remember, if you plan on using these molds for the spine, just don't paint the area that you're going to be gluing them down on. That way your adhesion is the best. But this is the way I thought was the easiest. So once I get all of my aging done to the second book, I'm just going to grab some of this really pretty ribbon that I had gotten a while back from Amazon, tie a simple bow, and then this one is going to be finished. That will complete this set of books. I know it was a little lengthy. You guys will have to let me know, how did I do on upcycling these books? Now to move on to our final project. This one's actually going to be pretty easy and straightforward and quick. So I'm just going to start with this pink vase that I had thrifted, remove the tags, clean it up very well, and then take it out into the garage and spray it in this dark walnut shade from Rust-Oleum 2X. Once I get it back into the craft room, I'm going to grab some of this bonding primer from Sweet Pickins, and I am going to go around the vase applying this all throughout. I just want to make sure that my milk paint's going to stick, and I'm hoping to get a little bit of cracking also. All right, once that is all dry, I'm going to grab the color Creamy from Sweet Pickins milk paint. So far, this is my favorite color. I love it. It's the perfect white. But I'm going to apply a coat all around, dry it down with my heat gun, use a sanding sponge, and then just kind of sand it up a little bit, remove that dust. Then I'm going to repeat the process until I have the coverage that I'm happy with, because as you can see, one coat is not going to do it. And I do end up applying 3 coats of this paint. And once I've got those 3 coats on, would y'all look at this beautiful cracking? All right, that cracking is gorgeous. I love how that walnut color is coming through. So I'm going to go ahead and take some clear liquid patina and I'm going to seal that in. There are a few spots that I'm a little concerned may chip off because I don't want too much chipping off, but I definitely am loving the crackle. So the liquid patina is going to be used as a sealer just to kind of hold all that paint together. Once it is dried down, I will take my sanding sponge and I'm just going to go over it. That way, if anything's going to chip off, it's going to chip off on me instead of the buyer. And like I said, I'm just doing this lightly, just going all around. Out of the transfer book, Madeleine from IOD, I am going to be using this piece right here. I'm going to make little notches on the very bottom just to help me lay that down and rub on because of the way it kind of bends right here at the bottom. With one of the little burnishing sticks that are included with all of the IOD, I'm just going to start rubbing. I do like to go over the entire section that I am working on, and then I will start at one edge and rub and lift up on that vellum sheet as I am going, just so I can see that it is sticking down. And if something's not sticking, I can just lay that vellum sheet right back down and rub some more. I'll then work over onto the edge and start working my way around. And again, just lifting up on that vellum sheet as I am going. Once I get up to the center point, I like to start around on the other side. Just kind of flip it over there and then just start working around on that opposite edge. That way I can kind of meet in the middle. I don't know, I just found this way for me works well, but you guys will find a technique that works best for you, so you do you. And then with the back side of that vellum sheet, just rub down, making sure all of your transfer is adhered. I'm then going to grab a sanding sponge, distress this back a little bit, apply some clear spray sealer, and this project will be done. And guys, thank you so much for joining me this week, and I hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.